Welcome to the program, Greg. It's great to have you.
Thank you for having me.
I always ask the first question, Greg, is what brought you to Treasury and why did you choose Treasury as your career?
Just pure luck brought me to Treasury. I was actually in internal audit, did an audit of the hedging and trading of my former company, and took a great interest in it and realized our audit programs are just out of date. They just didn't match risk and reward and what we really should be focused on. So I rewrote them, got to know the area well, and told the director of Treasury that if that job ever came open, I'd be interested in applying for it because it really interested me. And that's how I ended up in Treasury. And like I said, just loved it and have stayed in it since.
Just for the listeners, I'll give them a quick background. So you started it with Deloitte in professional services for 5 years, joined FMC and spent 5.5 years there, initially in FP&A, but then moving into that FX and commodity trading, as you mentioned.
Actually, at FMC was initially in internal audit, and that's how and then I did a stint in FP&A, and then that job became available in Treasury, and that's how I moved into Treasury.
Super. And then from there, you switched to banking and went on to the FX sales side for 5 years and did a bit of personal trading in between. And then basically you've spent the last 13.5 years with JBT as the group treasurer. So what would you say have been the career highlights so far, Greg?
There's a lot of different highlights. I really enjoyed my time in banking and working with a lot of different corporate customers. I learned a lot about risk and how different companies look at it, how they manage it, how they think about it. But now as treasurer, I'd say we just did a convertible bond. It's our first publicly traded debt ever. And that was a great experience. And so I'd say that's also probably one of my career highlights.
How would you say Treasury varies between the industries that you've worked in?
I can't really answer that one because I work for FMC and now I work for JBT, and we're actually just a spin out of FMC. So I've been in roughly the same industries. What I've seen when I was working for the bank and looking at customers, it's not so much Treasury. There are differences there I was noticing, but also just where's the focus of a company as far as risk? Is it quarter over quarter, year over year? Is it translation, transaction? That's where I notice things, but the industries have always been pretty much in manufacturing.
What about the differences between corporate and the banking side? How did you find the change there? Because obviously FX sales very different to corporate treasury.
It is, and it's exciting. It is but they both share one thing. There's a lot to learn. And if you like to learn, they're both great environments for that. The FX sales is a lot of people skills. It's also a lot of learning about the markets. So I probably learned more about interest rates and commodities and FX in my 5 years there than I probably would have in general, which has then been good experience to bring back to the corporate world in my current role, where I do need to know all of those because those are all critical to the business that we operate. So the other thing is probably, I would say on the FX sales and trading desk, pressure is a little bit different. It comes in very short blasts, if you will, but they're very strong. When you're answering phones and you're talking to people and you're making prices, and you learn to deal with pressure and you learn to deal with mistakes, because mistakes are going to happen and you have to move on. And that actually helps you in the corporate world. It doesn't come as quickly, but you're still going to make mistakes and you have to learn to pick up something from it, take something from it, but then move on.
Sure. Did you find it easy to make the switch to banking from corporate and then back again?
So I went from corporate to banking, and I actually found that fairly easy in the sense that I understood what the Treasury people were looking for. I understood the progression that would take. So, every company is different as far as the expertise level. So you have to learn that maybe options are going to go easily at one company because they are very advanced, but another company, they don't do options. And so there's going to be a whole education from the person you're talking to all the way up the chain to the CFO probably. So you learn how to talk to people and educate them and do that. So then, and I've now lost my train of thought as to what the question was. So.
And did you find it easy to make the switch back to corporate after being?
Okay, that's what I thought it was. So I want to make sure that. So thank you for clarifying. Yeah, it was easy. The hard part for me was getting used to being back in more of kind of that. It's a different pace, and it was a little bit of an adjustment there. And plus, I had been day trading for 3 years at that point. But it's funny. If I look back now, I'd be a better banker now than I was then because of my experience as treasurer and seeing the organization, both Treasury, but the whole company in a broader, more deep perspective. But I'd also, banking made me a better Treasury person because I now understand more of what the different parts of the bank do, how they look at things, how they look at risk, how they look at return. So I think both have helped me to understand the other side. So I think it's a challenge in some degrees, but overall it's been a great experience to kind of get both sides of it.
Sure. What's your advice to others around, and how have you approached networking throughout your career?
My advice to everyone is don't do what I did. I was not good and still am not great at networking. I did not build up a great network. I don't take advantage of it as much as I should. And I think there's a great value to it. I think there's a great value just even if you're not job seeking, it's great to have those other people to call and go, I'm looking at this, I'm thinking about that. What have you seen? How would you think about it? Just to be able to bounce ideas off people, but also to help your career. I think it's a great thing that I wish I had done a better job of as I came up the ladder.
What about mentors? Have mentors played a part in your career?
Of course they have. I actually, my first boss in Treasury is still somebody I'm good friends with. He's a great guy, but not only did he teach me some of the technical skills, especially around currency risk and hedging, but also just some of the people skills, how to motivate in a way that, there are different ways to motivate people. And his was purely by engaging them and challenging them in a positive way. And I learned a lot from him. And there are others too that I've learned from through the years, but there's that one person I can point out. I learned in my accounting days. I remember one of my bosses telling me something they always hold with me. He's like, Greg, we're not doing brain surgery here. Go home, have a drink, spend time with your family, enjoy life. No one's going to die if we don't get it done tonight. And I think sometimes we have to remind ourselves of that because we get too caught up in what we're doing.
That's really good advice, actually. I think that's a very good thing to have in your cap, isn't it?
Yeah, it's just helped me sometimes to put things in perspective.
What's the one piece of advice, Greg, that you wish you had have known, back when you were 25 and starting out in Treasury?
I guess I wish I had found a way to get some operational experience. Because you haven't asked this question, but one of the questions is, often that people wonders, how do you move from Treasury to a CFO role? And one of the things I know that's looked for is operational experience. And if I could have found a way back then to move into some kind of assistant controller, controllership, something to go into that role and then bring it back to Treasury, that would have been probably the best piece of advice that I could have gotten to move my career and maybe the path I wanted to go.
Makes sense for sure. What do you look for when you're hiring direct reports into your team?
Personality is probably number one. Having come from the accounting world, I feel like I can say this, but Treasury doesn't really have a feeder school or a feeder camp of talent, right? We have to kind of poach from other companies, but we don't have a big four, or back in my day, the big eight and big six to feed from like accounting does. So you learn a lot on the job. So I expect that the people coming in, we're going to have to teach a lot. So the technical skills are probably going to be gathered on the job. But I look for the personality, and I'm looking for strong personalities. And by that, I mean people that aren't going to be bullied easily or are willing to, are confident enough to stand up and sometimes go, hey, Greg, I don't get why we're doing that. Can you help me understand? It doesn't make sense to me. And the reason I want that is because we have millions of dollars moving through our, through our accounts. We're responsible for significant portions of the company's assets. And there's only 4 of us in Treasury in my group that is doing that. And, of course, we have all the controls of dual mandate and all that, but you need to have somebody that challenges the why you're doing something so that you can avoid mistakes or just even avoid bad decisions. So I look for strong personalities, and I also look for the intellectual curiosity, because again, most of what we're going to learn is on the job. I want that person that asks, hey, why do we do this? Or I know I'm not doing foreign exchange, I'm over here in cash management, but could you help me understand that? I'd like to learn more about that, because I want a well-rounded team, and I think that really helps when you have the intellectual curiosity and a strong personality.
What do you think makes a successful treasurer in the eyes of the C-suite?
Obviously there's the basics, right? You've got to manage cash, debt, you've got to manage risk, basically protect the company's assets. But how can you apply those policies and those skills in a more dynamic and in a way that helps the sales team if you need to do sales in other countries, or helps them make decisions on where to allocate capital? I mean, I think a successful treasurer is similar to how I just described the employees I look for, is somebody that's willing to speak up and kind of, even though it may not be technically treasury, it's still something that you're a business person. You have an opinion. You should be willing to voice that, obviously in a professional way, but you're getting paid, I assume good money as a treasurer, that you should be willing to now step up and take a risk, but express your thoughts and your opinions to help the business run successfully.
Sure. Technology is changing pretty rapidly, Greg. How do you see the role of the treasurer changing in the coming years?
It's funny. I was listening in on the Euro Finance conference, about a month ago, I guess, and they had one of the sessions was on Treasury over the past 30 years, and one of the speakers said that, although a lot has changed in Treasury over those 30 years, really the basics, again, back to cash management, debt management, risk management, protecting the assets, that hasn't changed. And when you talk about technology, I don't think that's going to change the basics of what we need to do in Treasury and as treasurers. What I think it's going to do, and what I'm already seeing it doing, is the amount of information you get, it comes faster and it comes in a much higher volume. So what I think we're going to have to do is, before years ago, it was always trying to make decisions, sometimes maybe too little information. Now it's going to be, how do you get through all that data that's coming at you to find out what you really need to make a smart, thoughtful decision. So the challenge isn't going to be getting the data. It's going to be sifting through it to find the right data to help you make the right decisions. Technology is just a tool. We just have to apply it correctly. But I do think it speeds up the decision-making process, which means we have to be faster with our thinking, faster with our decision-making, and smarter about what data we use to make it.
That's a great insight, Greg. Thank you very much. And it's been great chatting to you. I've really enjoyed your insights, and thank you for coming on the program.
Thank you for having me. It was great talking to you.